everyone, and welcome to day 2 of our November series. It will be wonderful to spend 1 hour with you today, and we will be discussing about employee experience. And we will try to make this conversation as holistic as possible, touching on physical, emotional, mental, and even financial well being. My name is Minola Jacques. I will be your co host for the next hour and actually for the following panel as well. We have our super Jessa working her tech and logistics magic backstage. So please, as you enjoy this conversation, do give her a big shout out of appreciation in the comments. First and foremost, I encourage each and every one of you to use the comments first and foremost to let us know where you're connecting from. And also, do let us know what wonderful moment of the day you are enjoying on your time zones. It's always tricky whether to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And we have an amazing lineup of speakers today. So, Jessa, please do help me bring them on the screen. And as they pop up, I will also welcome everybody in the audience as they keep joining us. And please do consider the space of the comments as much your conversation space as ours here in the panel. We keep discovering so many different cultural, geographical nuances to our conversations, and it's always such a great learning experience from us also. Now, without further ado, let's make the most out of our time here today. And you all know the drill. The first round is easy. I will pass the e-mic around as you appear on my screen. But today, I feel inspired to do something different. So I will go counterclockwise, quite a change from how I normally do this. And it's always a joy and an inspiration to share a conversation with another fellow Hacking HR moderator. So, Mina, could you just please pioneer us into this round of first, a short intro, and second, what is it about this topic that it's so meaningful to you that you decided to spend a chunk of your time and energy with us today? So, Mina, welcome. Good to see you.
Hi, Minola. It's amazing to be on this panel with you. We've been just like doing this for some time. It's really rare that we happen to be on the same panel. So this is really, I'm thrilled to be on this panel with you. And I'm the founder of Happy Work Studio. I have been in the remote work space since 2012. And since the pandemic, the happiness part, well-being part has been dear to my heart. And it's not that we started with the pandemic, but we started realizing that this is the priority. And so I have been working with companies to help them strategize the well-being and both physical and mental well-being in their companies, because and we will be talking more about it today, but without strategizing it, it's just like, one shot initiatives that does not serve the company on a long run. So yeah, this is like, how I am also living what I preach. And so I am really happy to be surrounded with so many great panelists today. And thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Stephanie, welcome. What a joy to have you with us today.
It is so great to be here today. It is always fabulous to see you, Minola, and I'm so happy to have such a great group of panelists to chat about this important topic. I'm Stephanie Lemick. I am a former HR executive and founder of the Wounded Workforce, which is an organization dedicated to building trauma-informed workplaces. So this conversation is absolutely near and dear to my heart because I believe that we are in a moment where our workplaces can change for the better of everyone's workplace experience, but I also think the workplace can be a real catalyst for change overall in our society as we approach mental health and well-being. I'm so excited for our conversation today.
Wonderful. Andrea, good to see you on my screen. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's also lovely to be here with you all. I lead up HR for WebMD, but Also, I'm very passionate about the topic of wellness and mental health in the workplace specifically. I wrote a book on mental well being and teaching managers how to better support people at work. So, when I think of this topic about culture and the human experience and business strategy, to me, there is no workplace without those components and factors because you have to have all of them to have a successful and healthy business. We don't always know how to do it very well, even if logically we know that we need those things. So I'm really excited to share and also learn from my fellow panelists about how we can do this better for all of our employees.
Thank you. Jennifer, welcome. It's great to have you with us for this topic.
Thank you. I'm Jennifer Galinsky, and I'm the head of HR for the Southeastern Electric Reliability Corporation. For those of you who are not familiar with CERC, we have delegated authority from FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So we are responsible for safeguarding the power grid and helping everybody keep the lights on. So it can be stressful at times, and it can be filled with government regulations. And I've been at CERC now 4 years, and that was one of the first things I noticed was that we needed a more holistic approach to how we cared for and supported our employees. So I'm very excited to share with you today some of the initiatives that we've undertaken over the last 4 years, and I'm looking forward to hearing new ideas from everybody else so that I can continue to grow our program. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Alvin, how wonderful that finally technology helps us and you are able to join us. So good to see you.
Yeah, so good to see you too, Manola, and all my fellow panelists. So good evening from the APAC region. My name is Alvin Lim, and I'm based in Singapore. I have about 15 years experience working internationally in communications, talent insights, and HR. I spent the majority of the last decade working as a consultant, building and activating culture-led global EVPs for organizations like Lenovo, like GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, just to name a couple. And until most recently, I was just leading global talent attraction for an incredible engineering company called Dyson, until I resigned to take a career break in August to reset and reflect on what I really like to do going forward, as well as to spend time with my young son, who had a pretty difficult journey coming into this world. So I'm very big on driving more altruism, compassion, and empathy in the modern workplace. So personally, this topic is a huge one for me. So I also noticed that this topic is featuring in our Hacking HR paper, which is the 24 Imperatives for HR in 2024, which I was involved in as well. So that's now available for download on our LinkedIn community page. So thank you for having me here today with all of you.
Wonderful. And so many delicious conversation, Candice, from this first round alone. So before we get flooded with questions, whether this panel is being recorded, which I would suspect should start right about now. Yes, this conversation is being recorded, and you can go back and check the recording either here on our LinkedIn space or the surest option is hackinghrlab.io. Now, before we jump very, very deep into the topic, I was looking at the title of our panel today, and it's something that I do in my change work every day. It's a reflex I kept from my journalism days, and that's let's make sure that we are clear on how we use the words and the concepts we will be talking about. So I see wellness, I see well-being, I see mental health. Andrea, I loved that you mentioned mental well-being. And there are so many organizations out there who use these words interchangeably, who oftentimes say, oh, we will put mental health under wellness and well-being because that softens the stigma. There are companies who are at the very opposite end of the spectrum. So I would really invite all of you, just take a few minutes and really look at mental health, well-being, wellness. How do these overlap, and how are these concepts in and of their own right? And Stephanie, I will ask you to lead us into this round of thoughts.
You knew I was ready to say something, didn't you? I think for me, first and foremost, when these terms are used interchangeably, I think I have the strongest reaction to mental health being lumped in with wellness and well-being. Because the thing about mental health is health. Your health care includes your physical body and your mind. I think we so often kind of take it and make it something else to soften it, or because of, years and years of stigma there has been around mental health. But I think acknowledging mental health as part of health and healthcare is really important, and for a lot of reasons. And probably the biggest reason I can think of is around access and accessibility when it comes to mental health care. So first and foremost, that's when I think of. When I think of wellness and well-being, I think it softens the language a little bit. I think these are kind of fluffier terms, not that they don't have their place, but I think they miss the point sometimes. When we talk about wellness and well-being, we miss the point of the proactive care that's needed. And I think you can tell I'm not as big of a fan of wellness and well-being as terms as I am of mental health care, because I think it softens too much. I think more of wellness and well-being as preventative care, but I also think it gets a little into self-care and some of the things that are a little bit fluffier and less at the root of systems, processes that really can make impactful changes for everyone. So I have probably a stark opinion around that. I like to talk about mental health. I am not afraid to use the word that I think is most relevant, talking about trauma-informed workplaces often in my work. So I would love to hear others' thoughts on this, though, because I probably have too strict of a definition just based on my perspective.
Wonderful. And now is one of my favorite facilitation highlights. And I declare the unmuting competition officially open. And Andrea, I see you unmuted, so please take it away.
Yeah, I also have some very strong opinions, and I love to hear yours, Stephanie. And mine aren't that far off, but just a little different spin. Working for a wellness well-being company, we do use that language to internally and externally to refer to a whole host of things. So I think what I have seen is that a lot of employers specifically will use that language, the wellness or well-being, to categorize an entire bucket of benefits, of vendors, of all the things that you could put into physical, mental, financial benefit category. And it could be so wide that you're right, it is not specific. And in some ways that is good, in my opinion, because people are different and everybody's wellness journey looks different. And what you need today may be different than what you need 6 months from now. And so employers do need some type of bucket to say, no matter what you're dealing with, here are the resources in this drop down, this committee, this category of items. But I do agree with you that mental health is a little different. So what I have found in my HR work, and also, talking and speaking in forums about it, is that when we bring up the topic of mental health, people immediately jump to mental illness. And while the National Alliance of Mental Illness, NAMI, tells us at least 1 out of 5 US adults does suffer from a mental disorder in a given year, which that is a lot, right? 1 out of 5 do suffer, but 5 out of 5 of us have mental health. We all have mental health, and we have to take care of it just like our physical body. And so I'm 100% aligned with you on that. We have to be clear that mental health is not a sickness. It is a fact of being human, and it does deserve that same level of care. But the language around wellness and well-being, I think I've just seen it as a bucket of things that does then, in my opinion, need to be further distributed to be more specific, to actually help people get the resources and have access to what they need at the time.
Mina.
So I'd like to go next. Yeah, I think this is more like the state of being. So when we say well-being, is about like the state, and that's stabilizing, like in different areas in your life. So yes, mental health is really dear to this topic, and it's really crucial because, like, as both Andrea and Stephanie was mentioning, most of the employees, when we talk about the workplace, they are suffering from mental health, and there are, like, other aspects of well-being is having an impact on the mental health and mental well-being. So I think there needs to be extra attention paid to the mental health. But at the same time, I'm also looking at this as a holistic thing, because, like, if you cannot give them the financial well-being, I mean, there needs to be like a ground, like a psychological safety, psychological well-being in the company, so that we can talk about mental health as well. So I think it is just like, that's why it's really important to look at it from a holistic point of view, because each one of those factors about well-being and how we are just like providing that to our employees is having that that I think they're all interlinked with each other. And at the I think the mental health is the one that shows up at the end, where everything is just like burning. So I think we should be taking all those necessary steps so that we are not seeing that deterioration in the mental health of the employees.
Jennifer, yes, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. I agree with everything you're saying. One of the things that we've focused on has really been coping skills and has been resilience, right? Everybody has their perfect storm. Everybody has the situation where it's just going to, push them past their tipping point. The question is, what is your personal tipping point, and what can you do to help yourself and help your employees manage as much as they can with the resources they have available, so that they have the wherewithal to tell you before they get to the tipping point, right? We worked with the owners of 10% Happier, which is a great meditation app, and we brought our employees all 6 months free trials, and then they could decide whether or not they wanted to keep it. We worked with the Institute for Organizational Mindfulness and did 4 different classes with them that everybody could take online and then look at, review later if they wanted to. We just keep coming up with more and more outside of the mental health benefits with your health insurance, outside of sending somebody to EAP, Employee Assistance Plan. We just keep coming up with things that will help employees cope and manage stress. And I think all of that supports mental health. Our annual wellness challenge, our financial seminars, and our community service. And even sometimes just having a happy hour at the end of a long week will help people. We have in place where you can have an alternate work schedule where you can work 1 hour extra Monday through Thursday and have every other Friday off. And that's been really well received. We also make a point to make sure that people are taking their time off. Our PTO is generous. However, if you don't take it, it doesn't do you any good. And we do run quarterly reports, and then we go, I hate to use the word nag, but we remind people that benefit is available. And we really mean it when we say work-life balance. We work hard, but then we also want people to take advantage of what we're offering. And we offer things remote, in person, multiple times over a week, different days, things like that, to make it as accessible as possible to people. And the feedback has been really good.
Thank you so very much, Jennifer. And Alvin, you won yourself the hot seat of going last.
Sounds good. I feel like we've followed the pattern of introductions as well. It feels like almost, yeah. I just wanted to say semantics, as someone who deals with semantics day in and day out, as part of my role, defining employer value propositions, they are so important, especially what I heard from Andrea when she talked about, mental health now being a fact. It's a fact. It's like our physical body. We've got a mind we've got to take care of. Someone said in the chat right there that our minds are a muscle that needs care as well. And semantics is so important that way, because what does it mean to work in an organization? An organization is a group of people coming together, right, with with a goal in mind, right? And often in our organizations, it's about profit, right? And I think that it's so important then to recognize that it's about how we organize ourselves, and therefore it's about the people. And there is an author named Michael Jenkins. He's founded a company named Expert Humans. He wrote a book about how toxic humans in organizations, especially in leadership positions, are making their organizations ill by creating dysfunctional and stressful professional environments. So I had this privilege of being taught by Michael in Singapore for a global HR leaders seminar. And his work is so incredibly interesting because he's done research into the kinds of traits that toxic humans exhibit in organizations. And he suggests that in a modern workplace, we need to pursue a framework of what he calls altruism, compassion, and empathy in order to break this cycle of dysfunction. And for anyone who's interested in the topic of architecting employee wellness, I think his work is an incredible way of framing the symptoms and the conditions, knowing the problems that we've got to fix that are causing our organizations to have poor mental health, rather than just simply coming from a position of checking off boxes and solutioning for the sake of it. So I'll say it again for your benefit. The Rise of Toxic Humans, Expert Humans, Michael Jenkins. You can actually search that up on Google as well. Really interesting piece of work that could really help us to see this piece of work, mental health in organizations, in the dimension that maybe some of these conditions, well, absolutely some of these conditions are caused by the presence of toxic humans and the rise of toxic humans in organizations as well.
Mhm. Thank you so very much. And I do want to let our audience know that we're keeping, at least I am keeping one lens on your comments, and there are already a couple of mental post-its with your questions. We will address them as we move forward. I was really wondering, we've had so many conversations about employee experience, but I was wondering what makes an employee experience special from a wellness point of view, and even more so, extra points available for what makes an employee experience, an employee wellness experience, holistic. And Andrea, I really picked up on your perspective in this conversation of being of HR, but outside of HR, and really having a wider umbrella for this topic.
Well, I think the employee experience is so different because every employee is different, right? But not only that, I mean, I started my career in a manufacturing facility. So what does that look like from a wellness perspective compared to high tech or a big company that has more resources? And I think what it comes down to is creativity. And maybe that's not the answer you were expecting, but as humans, we desire new and change and novelty, but also predictability, which is why we have job security, because that's really hard to do. So what I have found is that when we're talking about all the aspects of wellness and the engagement of humans, you really have to start with training your leaders on what that even means. Because normally, as we all know, you're a really good individual contributor. How about you manage these people? And I'm going to give you a 1-hour session on how to fill out the timesheet, not break a law. Congratulations, you're a manager. That is not going to cut it. And I think through the pandemic and through this awareness of holistic engagement and well-being and what works for people, we have to do better with that. So I think it's getting creative with training managers on what they actually need to know. You know, what are the biases they're falling into that they weren't expecting? Is there a presence bias for people who are physically there versus those who are remote? You know, what kind of biases are we doing in performance reviews? And even just assigning things. Are we assigning the same types of projects to different people for diverse perspectives? And so I think when we're talking about the employee experience as it relates to culture and a healthy organization, we have to zoom out a little bit and say, how are we preparing our leaders? How are we giving them the language and the tools to actually know how to manage, and then set them up for success to take care of people? And not only that, but the autonomy to do so. Because we can have all the best talking points in the world, but if managers don't feel empowered to let people have that early Friday off, or to go to their counseling appointment, or to hit that 7 a.m. gym class one morning because it sets their whole day right, then it's not really going to work long term. So I think having autonomy, training, and being creative as to what will work for employees, that is how we get to better engagement. And I also just want to acknowledge that that's easier in an exempt workforce. Right. So I think when we're talking smaller business or hourly staff or people who have to be physically somewhere, that's really where the creativity comes in. And what can you do? Like, we know what you can't do, but what can you do? And the last secret, you can ask. I know it's sometimes scary to ask people what they need or want because you're afraid you won't be able to deliver, or they'll ask for the moon and you can't give it. That's okay. And you might preface your survey or your questions with that. Like, we may not be able to do it, but what would make your life easier realistically, especially in those harder to reach populations?
I love that Andrea brought up managers, because I think we all know, as talent professionals, HR professionals, leaders, managers matter, and they make a huge impact on an employee's experience. And we think about employee experience a lot of times, like we think of wellness or healthcare or different things. We think of them like programs, but really, employee experience, culture, these things are every day. What an employee is experiencing every day. Their manager is going to have a massive impact on what they're experiencing every day. But oftentimes we forget that managers are employees too. And those managers, not only are they missing out on the training that they may need to really be thoughtful about employee experience, mental health, wellness, they also don't have the tools and resources they need to prioritize that for their team and for themselves. So I often think when we think about mental health and wellness, to support others, we first have to start with supporting ourselves. And I think that's where it's so, so important for organizations looking to make an impact on this journey, really be thoughtful about their managers, not only in terms of providing them with the right expectations, but also providing them with the right supports to care for their own mental health, and then to be able to do that for their teams.
I would also like to add one thing. We have a Chief Wellbeing Officer program by World Happiness Foundation, and we are talking about and utilizing the U.S. Surgeon General's framework of mental well-being. And in that one, we have like 5 components, and I think it's really important to touch those 5 components if we want to create an employee experience with a holistic view. And one of them is work-life harmony. So I really like to call it an harmony, because like if we think about the balance, then we are just like thinking about 2 sides to it. So work and life actually work is part of life. So if we just allow people to harmonize it so that they are not connotating the work with something negative in their life, and just like creating that autonomy, giving them that flexibility, and that's really important in hybrid and remote work environments as well, and creating some purpose, like meaning at work. So the mattering at work part, where they are just like relating themselves, their life purpose with the purpose of the company. This is still something new with most of the companies, finding that purpose level, because when we talk about well-being, it's usually like the pleasure side, creating those happy hours, happy times at the companies, but seldom that they think about that purpose level of well-being. And also the protection from harm, making sure that they're psychologically and physically safe. And again, with remote work, it's really important that the companies are also providing those the tools and the C's and everything that they get to use at home or like anywhere as well, so that they are also having the physical well-being, physical wellness, even at home. And also I think connection, community, the feeling of community, the belongingness is really important, because like it's peer support, the belonging to like a team and the company. And last one is, and I think this is really important, providing an opportunity for growth, so that they have the sense of growth, sense of progress in the company, so that they are just like making that progress and feeling the growth within the company as well.
I think when you're talking with employees, the three things they want is to be heard, to be valued, and to belong somewhere. And so I think everything we're talking about really goes back to that. When you're asking people individually what they want, what would help, right? That is what we're doing. We're giving them a chance to be heard. We may not be able to do everything that they need. However, we can work with them to find resources that we may not be aware of or may not be in our wheelhouse. And that's one of the great things about events like this and about being part of organizations. I'm in SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, as well as a lot of other things. And you glean a lot of information from what your peers are doing and how they're helping people. And we just need to sometimes just start the conversation. The other thing that we're doing, because we don't always know what people need, is there's a great 8-hour course called Mental Health First Aid. And it's we're giving it to all our managers. The HR team has been trained in it for years. It doesn't diagnose, right? It just recognizes when somebody needs help, and you help them recognize that as well. So if you haven't heard about Mental Health First Aid, that's a great course to bring into your organization.
Thank you. I see we are settling into a pattern of of coming up for answers. Alvin.
Yeah, this is really interesting. So the word purpose was mentioned, right? And I feel that often where people wellness initiatives have failed, in some of the companies that I've consulted for and worked in, is when we didn't actually have a North Star. And I think one example that I've actually really seen effectively is the use of something like the employer value proposition or part of the HR operating model as a North Star for change. And something like an EVP can be so subjectively interpreted by different personalities within the organization. So I think what's really important for us is to try to build a data picture so that we're doing better than gut feel. And I think to build that purpose, it means building and mapping, talent personas of our employees that help us to understand their profiles better, what truly drives and motivates them, what are the pain points for them in their lives at work and in their lives in general. I think one of us said earlier, life and work integrated for sure, because we're spending so much time at work, right? And once we've built this data picture, we can actually use this to visit different dimensions of that EVP or our framework for people wellness, right, as a driving force for change. And I think if we don't have a CPO or people team that really firmly believe that we need to take good care of our people, and that means their wellness, their mental health, right, and what motivates them, what galvanizes them to give their best at work. Until you have that buy-in and that lobbying even at that C level, it's very, very hard for you to define that sense of purpose and to architect wellness initiatives that are aligned to that sort of North Star.
That's absolutely wonderful. I just realized that we are 3 minutes into the second half of our conversation. Hacking HR hours are always shorter than regular hours. And you brought the conversation very close to something that I meant to ask from the very beginning. So I was just pacing myself up to this point. I loved that you all touched on resources. You all gave examples of amazing programs, amazing initiatives. But I am curious to take this conversation a little bit deeper with a different spin. how can we make this holistic employee wellness experience beyond programmatic? How can we embed it as a statement of a healthy company culture? And extra points available. There was a comment very early on into our conversation. How about the reality of small and medium-sized enterprises? So how can we do this work beyond being programmatic about it? And how does that work feel any different within a non-corporate environment? And I will just leave that question there and see where inspiration strikes and who has warm fingers for unmute.
I waited just to see if, you know,
No, we don't break the pattern.
I mean, for me, it is all about culture. It is all about how every day is for your employees, for your team. And mental health has to be a part of it. Because I mean, sometimes to think about, you know, mental health like physical health, if we sit all day and then work out for 3 hours a week, we're still not taking care of our mental health. So back to the programmatic aspect of mental health, if we ignore our mental health or ignore the mental health of our teams for 90% of the time, we miss really the most benefit that we can realize. And the thing about it is thinking about mental health as a lens, as you approach your culture, as you approach your processes, your work, the things you're doing, considering mental health. And this is one thing where I think, you know, trauma-informed workplaces, the principles of trauma-informed workplaces we use at the Wounded Workforce can be very valuable because it helps address specific needs for individuals around safety, including financial safety, psychological safety, trust and transparency, empowerment. So you're thinking about these things as you consider each aspect of work. And the truth is, work is an amazing, positive piece of mental health. Having a purpose, having a connection, feeling as though you are contributing and making a difference is an amazing aspect of mental health. And I don't care if you are a 5-person business or tens of 1,000-person business, working together to achieve a common goal, really focusing on that and leveraging that and moving forward in that way with the lens of mental health consideration, I think absolutely you can create and make an impact for your team members. And I think the key is, listen, we're not all always going to get it right. That's every single one of us as individuals, that's managers, that's leaders, that's organizations. But recognizing that, having humility, and then making changes to get better, that is incredibly impactful. And your team members will feel heard when they see that you're like, hey, you know, we didn't make sure you were taking all of your PTO. To Jennifer's point earlier, you know, providing something and then not having people leverage it. You know, really iterating on that and listening to your employee base is another great way to continue to think about that lens of mental health in every aspect of what you're doing.
I would like to underline the importance of being authentic about understanding the employees and just like really caring for them, not just for the sake of being like a me too, just like checking the boxes, but like really genuinely caring about them and just making sure that they are also feeling that. And I think we saw that the example of that during the pandemic. And when people really cared about those employees, they could feel that, because like you can just like, you know, tell it from even the eyes of people or even from the way they interact with you. So just like, you know, not only asking how they feel or how they're doing or how is their family just for the sake of asking it, but just like genuinely caring about the employee, genuinely caring about their needs. And I think it's really important. I think Jennifer was saying that, like, asking about the employee and just like, doing pulse checks, but at the same time also taking action on them, not only asking, but just like, getting back to them, showing the progress, showing that they really care, and connecting that to culture. And as Stephanie was saying, I think connecting everything to the culture, making it the culture of the company, so that the behavior of the employees are also set by the culture, and everyone's just like, making sure that everyone's clear about the do's and don'ts in the company, so they are just like, everyone is clear, and it's kind of like a set of values within the company, so that everyone knows how to act and how not to act, so that this becomes like a habit, something like, automatic, so that, you don't have to just like, tell people it's in the air in the company, even when it's like a virtual environment, so that, when you enter a meeting, that what is accepted and what is not accepted, so people are just like feeling comfortable in that environment, so that they don't feel intimidated, or they don't feel that there's lack of trust or a lack of psychological safety within that environment.
My inner rebel wants to break the pattern. Alvin, do you want to jump in at this moment?
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. Better not for me to have the last word again. That's a good one. Yeah, I was just thinking that just to echo Stephanie's and her point around starting with the actions, right? So I think it starts with micro actions, even like how you talk to people. Are you leaving the office on time? Are you not visibly working and shouting about working when you're on PTO, right? That paid time off and things like that, right? And culture eats strategy for breakfast. We heard this all the time. And this is a huge challenge in so many different parts of the world, and very noticeably here in APAC, where even parents are sometimes afraid of leaving work early to pick the kids up from school on time. And here in Singapore, after school care fines you $1 every minute you're late picking up your child. And I've seen employees who'd rather cop this fine and let their children wait than be an unreliable employee. And I think it begins and ends with the leaders. What behaviors are the leaders role modeling? And if they're not role modeling the correct behaviors, nothing's going to work. You can have the best framework in the world, but there are no proof points to back it up.
Okay, I'll go. I have some tactical examples because I do agree with all of the points made, but sometimes I think it's helpful just to have some tips you can implement. So what I like to always recommend is communicating via voice. That could be video, not video, in person if you can. But what I have found is that when we are doing chat and email and text, we just are projecting our own feelings, our own mental well-being, wherever we are in that moment gets projected onto the text or the literal text, because there is no voice to it. And as humans, in the absence of information, we will fill in the gaps. And it's almost never positive. And that is true for being clear, being transparent, sharing the expectations, especially with dispersed teams, setting working expectations of what are the core overlap hours. How do we communicate? When do we chat live? When is it okay to ping? What is the right expectation of when something is due? And some of that might feel like, oh, we're adults, we should figure it out. But clear is kind and unclear is unkind. And that is especially true, when the world is chaotic, which is now, having some really clear expectations creates a safe place for people to channel their energy, and it reduces anxieties. The second kind of point that I'll make here that we've all talked around is that research shows us, it tells us very clearly that when you have leadership buy-in of anything, it's going to go better and further throughout the culture and the values of the organization. So what I have found to be extremely effective is to have, yes, your C-suite, yes, your top leaders, but even managers or anyone in a leadership position talk about, I am taking my time off. I am, any storytelling they have, any examples of mental well-being or anything they want to share on culture. If we can work through storytelling and share it in a public, company meeting, that is going to give people permission. Even if they don't know or think they need permission, it gives it. And then it makes it okay to talk about because the boss just talked about it. And every single time we do this, it starts new conversations and new people feel like they're empowered to talk about what they actually need. And that is free. And we can all do that. If you get your leader buy-in. You got to do that first. But once you get that, that makes a really big difference from what I've seen.
I agree with you. And I'll tell you, we're hybrid, but we have Tuesday as a common day. And all the managers know that they need to get up and do a lap. I am the first one to tell you, I run in, right? I plug in my computer, I start cracking, I maybe stop for lunch, remember I haven't gone to the restroom, and keep going. And when we did an employee engagement survey, they said the managers need to get out of their offices, walk around, have conversations. So that's some of the things we've been doing. How was your weekend? How are your kids? How is your dog, right? Have any PTO planned? And those kind of conversations grow organically the more you have face time with people. So that's been really helpful for us. The other thing is that we use something called the DISC and values, which is behavioral, and people know what your DISC style is, DISC. Everybody on my team is now a certified coach. And what it did for us is to give every single employee in the organization a common language. And that common language allows us to make agreements and to hold each other accountable when you miss those agreements. So we were talking before about managing expectations. I tell my team, right, I don't expect you to work on your Flex Friday off. If there is something that you need to do or you didn't get done, right? Half the team is one Friday, half the team's the other Friday. Communicate before you leave and make sure you haven't dropped any of the 17 balls you're juggling, right, all week long. Have meetings with people before they go on PTO. Okay, what do you have that's open that I can help you with? And the managers, it flows both ways. Managers do it with their teams and teams do it with their managers. Those kind of managing expectations have become normal conversations for us. And we also put everybody's little DISC profile on our employee directory so that if you're coming to have a meeting with somebody who's a very high D, which means they make decisions very, very quickly, you know how to be prepared to go in and ask for what you want. Versus if you have somebody who's a very high S, that might be somebody who takes a long time to make a decision. You may not want to pressure them for a decision before you leave that meeting. So come prepared, have clear agreements, and then hold each other accountable. And that has just worked wonders for us.
It is so painful and so frustrating to say that we are approaching the end of our conversation. You all stretched and highlighted the importance of being mindful about taking a break. So the last thing we want is to role model how not to take a break between two back-to-back panels. So we do aim to wrap it up in about 6 minutes. And those of you who have been following Hacking HR panels know that this is a question I promised myself that I will ask in every conversation. And if we have future panelists, now you know what's coming your way. I do want to be mindful and inclusive of those realities of HR function of one. And everything that we covered seems like the work of at least a team of superheroes. So what I would ask each of you to do, and in the interest of time, I will pass the e-mic around, this time clockwise, and I will ask you, a few sentences, how would you recommend an HR function of one to prioritize their focus and their resources? And I'm also looking around the screen and I see such diversity. Is there something that is culturally sensitive in your area? Alvin, you're from the future, so you bring that perspective. Mina, I don't know where you are these days, but you're probably closer to me in Europe. And then we have US. So Alvin, an HR function of one, prioritize and make the most meaningful impact.
Yeah, I think if you're a team of one, it can be very powerful, right? Because that means you're making all the decisions, isn't it? So I think what is really I found really helpful personally as well is to create personas of our employees, right? Take a data-driven approach. Try to surface, using employee surveys or using a piece of work that you design yourself. You can do this in conjunction with ChatGPT as well. It is the one and only teammate you need sometimes, right? And you put that together and then you cross-check that with someone who's literate in this field, who's an expert, and you roll this out. And you can use GPT too, right, to pass the data and to create sentiment analysis of summaries, if you will, of the data across the board, and can use this to create personas. And then you can surface this internally within the organization to say, look, these are some of the gaps, these are some of the pain points. It is data driven, comes from our employees, doesn't come from gut feel. What do we want to do about it? So maybe that's step one.
Thank you so very much, and impressively close to keeping it within the time frame. Jennifer,
I have two suggestions. I have been an HR team of one on and off through my career. The first is utilize your resources. We talked about professional organizations, you have brokers, you have agents, you have people always trying to sell you things. Ask about free resources, ask what you can outsource. All of those are good options. The second is to use the employees that you have. We have commitment to culture committees. We have community service day. We recently created our ESG, environmental, social, and governance team this year. And you would be surprised how many people want to work on those because it's something they're passionate about. So engage people in what they're passionate about and use them as a resource as well.
Wonderful. Andrea.
I think what I would recommend, in addition to what's already been mentioned, is really focusing on creating that North Star of your value prop with your leadership team. Because once you are very clear about the experience, the company, the culture you're trying to create, every decision becomes so much easier to make. And before I worked at WebMD, I ran HR for the Oregon Humane Society. And I saw this done beautifully there because the question in every executive meeting was, does this help us support animals in our community? Mm-hmm. If the answer is no, we're not doing it. If the answer is yes, then let's talk about it. And that went through every decision made in the company. So that would be my recommendation, is get clear about what you want and then direct every single decision towards that vision.
Thank you. Stephanie.
Plus a million to what Andrea just said, especially as it relates to, thinking about leveraging a lens of your values, your culture, mental health, whatever that is, in every aspect of what you're doing and amplifying that choice. Like Alvin said, you're making all the decisions. So there's power in that. So you can really create a sense of continuity and drive culture through that. I'd also say, think about your managers. Your managers, yes, they need support and tools, but they are also amazing amplifiers. So in investing time and support and tools for your managers, you will be able to have massive impacts as it relates to overall culture and employee experience.
Thank you so much. And Mina, bring us home.
So I would recommend to keep it simple, because usually HR people, they think that, if they are just thinking about those complex initiatives, it's going to make people happier. But in a sense, as Alvin was saying, go with the simple. These small actions create big impacts. So always remember that and work with employee resource groups. Try to understand different needs of those different groups of people. Like I am running a lean in circle with the women at Vertasant that I'm giving advisory to. And I mean, that support, that peer support, understanding each other, understanding the challenges, having that feeling that someone else is also going through that challenge, feeling that camaraderie is so simple. You don't need to do anything. It's just like, it plays the magic on its own. So keep it simple, be genuine and authentic. That's what I would say to wrap up.
It's been an amazing conversation. I see that you also get credit across the comments. So Jennifer, Andrea, Stephanie, Mina, and Alvin, thank you for being here, and thank you for all your insights and your advice. Thank you everybody in the audience for sticking with us through this topic. I hope I will get to welcome as many of you as speakers in the future. And in 5 minutes, we will be back with another conversation. But please use this time for a mental breather, and let's reconnect soon. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Jessa. I will see you soon again. everyone. Welcome and good, whatever wonderful moment of the day you're enjoying on your time zones. It is a joy to welcome you and welcome back those who joined us from the previous conversation as well. We are in the second panel of the second day of our November series. My name is Minola Jacques. I will be your co-host for the next hour. We have Jessa backstage taking care of us. And we have an amazing lineup of speakers. The topic for this conversation is, and please bear with me as I will read out the title. There are so many keywords here, and I want to make sure I do it justice. So we will be focusing on human experience at work as the overarching culture goal and architecting employee experience and workplace experience accordingly. So this is the challenge that we have ahead of us. And I will ask Jessa to help me bring up the speakers. In the meantime, as we welcome them on the screen, I will continue to welcome those of you who join us. First and foremost, do let us know where Hacking HR is taking us across the world on this beautiful day. And also, please use the chat, use the comments. Do let us know what your answers are, what your thoughts are on the questions that we raise among the speakers. And also, please rest assured that I will keep at least one lens on the chat. And we always welcome highlights from your side conversation into our panel. So I see a lot of ready to fill you with energy and inspiration faces on the screen. And what I will do, I will pass the e-mic around as you appear on my screen clockwise. And the first ask is always easy. One, just shortly introduce yourselves. And also, please tell us what exactly from this impressive panel title inspired you to say, yes, I want to show up for this conversation. And Angela, it's good to see you.
Thanks for having me. Great to see everybody. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm on the unceded and traditional lands of the Semiahmoo, Kwantlen, and other Coast Salish people here in beautiful British Columbia. Really glad to be here. I'm an HR executive and an author of 2 books. And what prompted me to sign up for this panel is because I love work. I mean, I love work and I love working. Doesn't mean I'm a workaholic. It means that I really take a lot of pleasure and joy in being able to lend my strengths and my interests to making the world and the work world a better place. And so what drew me to this is I think that everybody should feel that way. People should really like going to work. And so let's together create a human experience where people don't dread the alarm clock going off in the morning, but instead get to wake up and say, yes, I get to do stuff that I really like.
How wonderful. Sandra, welcome. Good to have you with us for this chat.
Good afternoon where I am. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. So I'm a labor attorney. I've been doing HR since 2005, but I've been an attorney since 1997. And I said yes to this panel because my career has been concentrated around creating an employee and a workplace experience where, like Angela just said, people want to come to work. As a labor attorney, I was a prosecutor with the labor board. And I saw that a lot of times unions came in because management just had a disconnect with their employees. And when I went in-house, I focused on labor and employee relations to help the leaders and the operators maintain a culture where people felt like they were valued, they were heard. And last year, actually this year in June, seems like last year, I published my first book, and it was all about things I learned and how to effectively manage a workforce that will promote a great work experience and culture for the employees. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so very much. Julie, good to see you. Welcome.
Good to see you as well. Thank you for having me. I'm Julie Sincati. I'm joining you from Boston. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here today because I do think the employee experience is critical to the organization's success. And I think it's absolutely one of the most important things that we can focus on as employers.
And I don't even want to say how insanely early morning it is for you, Rod. So Rod is joining us from the future, literally. And we were wondering, will you be in a car, on an airplane?
No,
Where is Rod joining us from?
no, I'm Rod Hutchings. No, I've made it home. So I'm in Melbourne, Australia, and it is 4 a.m. So it's not too bad. I think it was 3 a.m. the last panel that I joined. And I joined. I just think it's really important to be able to create an supportive and inclusive workplace culture. It's really what I'm quite passionate about. And my background is in the military, in the Air Force, and also in consulting. And with the background in the Air Force, I really have a real passion for bringing real diversity into teams and providing opportunities for veterans. And so hopefully I can also just bring some different perspectives to the panel coming from that background.
Wonderful. And just before questions start to pop up in the chat, whether this conversation is recorded, yes, this conversation is being recorded, and you can go back and check the highlights that you enjoyed or recommend it to your colleagues and friends, either from our LinkedIn space or hackinghrlab.io platform. Now, before we delve deep into the topic, I was wondering, we mention human experience. In many organizations, the go-to expression is still employee experience. So my next question is, can we spend a few minutes really understanding how, if at all, human experience is different than just employee experience? And in what way is this an expression of a company's culture? And for some reason, I always go diagonally. So, Julie, that means that you are our pioneer in this round of answers.
Happy to be the pioneer on this one. So I do think that companies are starting to focus more on the employee in total. So the employee bringing their whole self to work. So I think you do see definition around and conversation around the human experience, because so much, especially post COVID, so much of work life is now blended. I mean, look at us, we're virtual today and having conversations all across the globe, literally. So there's many different factors that I think contribute to an employee experience and making that a human experience.
Let's see who has been training for the unmuting competition.
I'll have a go. I think that from a workplace or humans, I think human-centered could be about human-centered design, like the well-being, personal growth of an employee. Another perspective is really the concept of having a holistic employee experience, which is really from, when you recruit someone through to retirement, providing them through that career, meaningful work, opportunities for career development. Again, that's a real focus that I have about how I help can transition veterans into opportunities in civilian employment. How do we provide them meaningful work, taking their unique skills and opportunities for a supportive environment that can help balance the needs of the organisation and them as an employee? That's just one sort of group.
Great points from Julie and Rod, and I'd like to add that particularly COVID really emphasized people's need to have more than just go to work and have a paycheck. They really did want to have that whole human experience of being seen, being recognized, being appreciated, and being seen as a whole person, and not just the person that goes in, metaphorically 9 to 5 and does what they need to do just to earn a paycheck. And I think that's where the shift has been coming, on focusing on the human and not as a whole, and not just on the employee of the 9 to 5.
I echo everything that everyone said, and I'm going to bring it down a notch. In the beginning, I said I focused on labor and employee relations, and what the challenge I posed in front of the managers and leaders that actually manage a workforce is to make it and to individualize the experience for each employee. So bring it to the granular level. Very often I see employee recognition programs that are awesome. But what happened is we get in a rut because we're busy, everybody's busy, and we sometimes turn it into a system more so in a process more so than the humanity of the exercise. It's great to get a birthday card because the company and the leaders signed it, but then I go to work and I say good morning and you don't acknowledge me. So you just remove the humanity out of the experience that you just thought you were creating by sending me a birthday card. So my challenge to leaders is always, how do you make it individualized while you have an overall process?
I've been delivering for a few days now. I've been holding conversation spaces in my work, and we were talking about how we navigate changes and how we experience changes. So I was wondering, as we look at all these layers, the continuum of return to the office and work from home, where we are in terms of technology and, digital and AI and everything, where we are on the continuum of job security and search for purpose. I was really curious about asking a question in this panel in particular about what is the sweet spot of human experience intersectionalities with all these things going on. And I must admit that I'm biased to ask you, Angela, to go first on this one, because I think on Monday we shared a similar conversation. So how would you go about this? Where's the sweet spot for human experience?
The sweet spot, I believe, is in employees and people generally. They want to be treated as adults. They want to have agency. They want to be able to have a say in what and how they do it. They want to have psychological safety. They want to be able to go to work, put an honest day's work in, and not fear that their boss is going to yell at them or tell them that they have to put their stapler on the right side and not on the left side. I actually did work for somebody who used to do that. They were very specific about where you put your stapler. People want flexibility. People want to have autonomy. They want to know that, now, of course, not every job can do this. If you work on an assembly line, you can't leave in the middle of the day necessarily to go and watch your child at their soccer game or at their school assembly. But many of us on this call do have that flexibility where maybe we're office workers or white collar workers, and we want that flexibility to go for a couple of hours or to take a break in the middle of the day. And so I think that being treated as an adult, having agency, having flexibility, having some autonomy and say about how your work is organized and how you can do it, and then having the psychological safety to do it, that's the sweet spot.
Yeah, I really like your answer there. And I think what that reminds me of as well is that I think what's really important in an organization, and it is really part of the culture of the Air Force that I'm in, is really a culture of feedback and adaptation. That is like really having really established continuous feedback loops about and active communication about shaping what work's happening, about the culture of work, and then having those feedback loops, actually adapting with that, like listening to it, using the feedback to help the organization to evolve, to improve processes. That feedback adaptation is really key, and for it to be real, not just sort of you provide feedback, it goes nowhere.
I think Rod hit it on. Oh, I'm sorry.
So I was going to change. That was one point. I just wanted to make another point because you brought in is I think you talked about technology in part of the question. It was a very deep question, many layers to the question. I think a key thing with technology is just how do we best leverage technology to enhance but not replace the human experience at work. And I think really there's so many different digital tools available today, but how do we, again, streamline, routine processes, key things, how do we facilitate communication like we are, communicating this panel? And really that's all about enabling more meaningful work for the employees to engage in. I think that's the real key element of technology in the sweet spot is how do we make it an enabler, not a replacement.
There's a small lapse in your video and audio, Rod, and I almost spoke over you. So if that happens, I think take it as a sign of inspiration and energy from everybody. Sandra, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought, and I apologize, I thought you were done because there was a pause. But I was so excited about what you were saying because that's the point, I think, between what Angela said and what you just said, Rod, is that sweet spot where the employee feels like they have a voice and they have the psychological safety to express that voice. Because very often I operated primarily in the healthcare industry, and the caregivers, the bedside caregivers, always feel like they do not have a voice because the leaders get together and address the issues, and they always report back when I'm talking to them. I'm the one taking care of the patients. I can tell them how to fix this, but no one ever asks. So in addition to what you said about making sure that our systems and our technology is not so rigid, that we forget the human experience, but also when interacting and engaging the employees to make sure that they're part of the solution. I think Angela or maybe Julie said in the beginning that promoting the right human experience at work is a benefit to the company. We all often hear that your employees are your best assets. So it's making sure that we're manifesting that every day in our decision-making processes.
I think everyone's made excellent points, and I agree wholeheartedly. What I think is probably one of the best things that we can do in our jobs as HR professionals is really ensure that our employees are feeling empowered. And oftentimes when we're looking at making changes or looking at doing things differently, when we engage our workforce to support us in that, get their feedback through focus groups and surveys and things like that, that will often make the change more successful and create more stickiness for the employer as we try to retain our folks.
If I may, I'd like to build on something that Julie just said, which is about empowering employees. I think one thing that affects the human experience at work is that when leaders think about or talk about empowering, they believe it means let the employees run amok, let them do whatever they want. They don't really understand what empowering means, and they don't know how to explain or educate employees on how to be empowered. Sometimes organizations say, oh yeah, we empower our employees, but the employees don't know what that means exactly. Does it mean that I'm allowed to email the CEO specifically? Does it mean that I'm allowed to make decisions up to a certain dollar amount or up to a certain authority level? Am I allowed to make decisions that impact patient care or our customers? They don't really explain it. And a lot of managers, they fear it because they think that if I empower my employee, it means they don't need me as a manager. What job am I going to do if I can't order them around? And so I loved what Julie said. And I think that we need to be better in explaining what empowered employees means. What does that look like? And how does that impact the human experience at work?
Simply based on what we discussed here today, it feels almost, I'm not sure counterintuitive is the right word, but I will use it. It feels almost counterintuitive that we still live in certain environments where we still need to advocate and build a business case for a human experience and a workplace experience. So my next question is, how can we make this topic concrete in the business language and with business-friendly metrics? And I am using quotation marks because I believe that simply saying there's a business language and there's a human resources language is not the right way, but it's still the reality in many places. So how can we make this conversation around the imperative for human experience an equal conversation to the others around the business strategy?
I can start off, and then that's a conversation that I see is happening quite a bit. I don't know that people have figured it out yet. One thing that we do know is when you sit at the table with operators and they want to see how it impacts the bottom line. I think that's when you get the buy-in from the leadership of the company. They have investors that are looking for return on their investments. They have a board to report to. At the end of the day, even though HR has made a lot of progress at having a voice and impacting decision making, we still have a ways to go because they still see HR as nice and kind, things you would like to do, but not necessarily as a complete holistic business proposition. What we've done with the companies I've worked with is really bring it down to metrics. Like you say, you have to show them how it impacts the bottom line. You have to show them what's in it for the investors and the board and the other people that are vested from a financial perspective. And I have seen that when you have that conversation and you're well prepared and you present the metrics, like you said, the financial impact, the reason, like when you turn over people, the time that it takes to not only recruit a replacement, to train them up, and the goodwill, if you will, which is somewhat intangible, when someone who knows your systems and know your clientele leaves, what the financial impact is on the company. I think then it's a bigger and more productive conversation with the COOs and the CEOs.
Yeah, I think doing any business case, I think sorry.
No, that's okay. You can go first.
All right. I think one of the key things with any business case is really, I guess, with the particular organization, really understanding actually, what is the problem? What problems is the organization facing? And each organization can be facing different problems. So having worked out what problems, opportunities there are for the organization, then trying to relate that. So it could be, could be a high turnover, could be low engagement, lack of innovation. Like they're just different examples of problems an organization could be facing at a particular time. And then having identified what the problem is, then you can go about talking about using data to demonstrate how the human engagement can actually help improve those particular problem spaces. And I think many organizations are probably facing turnover, engagement, can vary. So that's the first thing. Just find out what is the problem that you need to be solving is key.
And I think it's important for the HR team and the HR professionals within an organization to really partner with the business leaders and create that strategic relationship. So really understand, what's keeping the executives that you're supporting up at night? How can you help them from a people process standpoint, either through creating efficiencies, recruiting, top talent, whatever the case may be, help them solve for their issues. And when it's data related, you produce that data that supports the decisions that will then move the business forward in the right direction.
I'm nodding my head. I've got so many takeaways already from this conversation, but I'd like to add that we can't underestimate the importance in hiring and developing leaders who have strong emotional intelligence. This is an underrated skill that goes a long way in the human experience. And in some cases, if you have a C-suite level that doesn't believe in the human experience and they're focused on maybe only the bottom line and don't see the employees as the way that they get to the bottom line, then what's worked for us in the past is to start with your middle managers. They're usually a big bulge of people versus the smaller number at the C-suite level. And so if you're hiring, promoting, and developing leaders who have strong emotional intelligence, they're going to be caring for their employees because they're going to have the self-confidence and the self-regard to not see employees as the threat, to not have to lead with fear, to create psychologically safe spaces. And in that way, you're enhancing the employee experience. That in itself will create that bottom line that Sandra and the others were talking about, which is now you've got less turnover, you've got less absenteeism, you've got higher engagement. When you have higher engagement, you have more discretionary effort from your employees, and that helps productivity in all cases.
And I agree, if I may add to what Angela just said, because that is important. Your middle managers are the ones that can carry out the day-to-day impact of the strategy. But I don't know if it's the same for everyone. It starts at the C-suite for me. They will have to be the one with the buy-in to create the budget, to allow for the training, to your point, Angela, so that we can get those middle managers to the level. And I love that you talk about emotional intelligence. I think that's what creates most of the issues that we see in the workplace. It's communication and emotional intelligence, honestly.
Well, those last remarks actually triggered my curiosity. And I was wondering what skills and capabilities are needed to be developed inside an organization. And I mean both within HR and also outside of HR, to be able to really foster a meaningful human experience. And you probably know this about me by now, that I do give out extra credit for skills outside of the circle of usual suspects. So what can people really develop so they can be up to this task?
I'll start. I think one of the things to help develop teams to be up to this task is having a passion, developing employees across the organisation in coaching, so how do people help each other? So really enabling the organisation in your teams to be able to support each other and really making that a focus. And by developing those sort of skills about coaching, about how I improve each other, that can just help translate into a better human experience, employee experience for everybody, I think.
I think we covered it initially, but emotional intelligence is really important. I think we need that first and foremost as employees and as leaders. I think we also need a focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. We need to ensure that that psychological safety is built, that trust and candor is built throughout the organization. So we need to support those efforts to ensure that the employee experience is genuine and they're able to, really wholeheartedly bring themselves to work.
And I'll add to that. I think both, to answer your question, within HR, it's the ability to speak, depending again at what level, right? Because you have HR specialists, managers, directors, all the way to the C-suite. It's at different levels. It's the ability to communicate what we call the WIFM, what's in it for me, to the person that you're trying to influence. Because HR cannot act independently. I've seen HR professionals that try to be the zealous advocate for the employees. And I'm like, no, you train, you influence. But at the end of the day, the operators are the ones that are making the decisions in most settings. And they seek our input, but really they're the ones making the decisions and crafting the experience. And so within HR, it's that ability to understand your audience, who you're trying to influence, and communicate accordingly. And within the operators, the people that actually can make the big difference day in, day out, because they're the ones managing the workforce, is what we said. It's emotional intelligence to me, understanding the big picture, not responding in the moment, and just not not losing sight of the big picture. How do you manage yourself in an environment where things are moving so quickly? You have remote workers that you don't see and you need to manage them. And that sense of agency that you mentioned before, Angela, you want everybody to be an owner and accountable for their area, but you don't even see them. So how do you bring all of that together and not lose your sanity? Because you're also the human that needs to have a good human experience. It's not just all about the employees. So bringing it all together.
I agree with so much with what everybody said, and I'd like to add that another skill that's important in creating the human experience is one of self-regard. I mentioned that word earlier. Self-regard, meaning that you can set boundaries on what you'll accept as behavior from your leaders, the C-suite or your middle managers, and also from yourself. In other words, are you also, as an employee, as a human resources professional, but as an employee, are you helping to create that great environment around you? So what's your role in it? And self-regard is a really important and underrated one, because sometimes bad behavior is allowed to continue because we allow it to continue. I don't mean us as human resources. I'm talking about collectively as employees. And to Sandra's opening comments, sometimes the reason why a labor union will go in is because of that disconnect between the organization and the employees. So having self-regard and boundaries and saying this behavior is not acceptable. When, of course, as Sandra said, having the C-suite buy in and provide the budget, but also be a role model is key. And sometimes they won't do it. Sometimes the C-suite does not see it, no matter how many times you show what's in it for them, no matter how many times. And where it's possible, the response is that employees need to leave so that the investors or the shareholders can say, hey, how come there's so much turnover in this organization? This turnover is costing us a lot of money. How come our productivity is down? And so really forcing that just through the employee actions of self-regard and setting those boundaries.
That's so important, and something that all of you said, and this importance of boundaries and constructive challenge comes up so much in conversations. I recently heard, and if I'm not mistaken, it was Brené Brown saying that always choose immediate discomfort over long-term resentment. And just listening to what you were sharing about this work of human experience, I think that definitely has organizational equivalents to, choose immediate discomfort over long-term resentment. Now, I was wondering, what are the biggest obstacles? What are the biggest bottlenecks that you have come across in doing this work? Maybe misperceptions or misassumptions.
I'll start, and maybe I think psychological safety. That was brought up earlier by Sandra, I think, and I'll just give you an example. I think that I probably 20 years ago I was involved with investigating an aircraft accident where 6 Air Force people died, and in investigating that, they were doing a certain type of activity, certain type of flying that was key for learning how to be an instructor. And what we found was that what we found is that when we investigated how previous pilots had exercised that particular maneuver they were doing, is that there'd been about 3 or 4 near misses that the organisation didn't know about. So we went back and we interviewed people over a 10-year period, asking them, okay, if you're going to go and do this particular type of flying, how would you do it? Please explain. And the root cause of why we found that knowledge of those near misses wasn't tapped into was because people didn't feel safe to speak up. And in this case, that resulted in 6 people dying, which is, pretty extreme, for this conversation. So what that really drove was a real imperative in the organisation to really make pilots, make the people doing the flying really feel safe, that when incidents like that happen, that we can bring that knowledge back in and we can improve. And I think, I mean, that's an example which is to the extreme, but that is just, I think, really key. Is psychological safety is really key.
I'll, if I may add to that, one of the biggest, I don't know if it's an obstacle, bottleneck, maybe opportunity, that I see is that I would say of all the people I've worked with since I started working in HR, maybe about 2% of them totally just had this theory X mentality that unless you stay on people, they won't do. I think it's the theory Y and the theory X. You know, some people believe that you need to have the hammer over someone's head to get them to produce. But most people, I think the challenge they have is really the how. They want to do the right thing, but the world moves at such a fast pace. And look, it's already almost one when we just started. And so time flies. You know, you come in, you have the great plan, right? The strategic plan, but you can't execute it because life just comes for you. Families are complaining, the patients are complaining, the employees are complaining, and you troubleshooting issues all day, and you never had a chance to get to your plan. So I think it's the ability. I don't know that you can manage time really. Time management is a misnomer in some circles, but it's the ability to really understand how do I do a little bit every day so that I can continue to implement and sustain and maintain an environment where the whole human experience is present. And it's a journey, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So it's the little things that you're going to do every day. But really, the obstacle is managing it all in the time that you have. Most people are at work 8 to 10 hours and still not enough to get everything done. So that's what I've encountered really as the biggest obstacle.
From my perspective, I think where I spend most cycles and most effort is alignment. So trying to continually align and influence various stakeholders to move a project, an initiative, whatever it may be, forward. So you spend a lot of time as an HR professional. Your teams will spend a lot of time also, trying to do this and incorporating different ideas, suggestions, thoughts, beliefs along the way. So you can include, every perspective that makes sense when you're trying to move something forward. So alignment's, really critical from my perspective.
I agree with what my panelists have said, and the role of a manager or a leader is to organize the tasks and manage the employees in a way that you can get the objectives met or the work done. And for a lot of managers, they feel overwhelmed by the tasks. They have to do reports, and they have to check this, and they have to meet with clients, and then they have to have one-on-ones with their staff, and they just don't know how to do all of that. There was a report that came out just I think last month from Gartner that said that the majority of managers feel completely overwhelmed and under prepared to manage employees. And so for some of it is we as HR professionals, but the C-suite leaders can also look at what work are we asking our people to do that's no longer necessary. Are we still doing work that we set up in 1980 and we've never looked at the processes? Are we still using technology that's, from literally like 1970? Again, I worked for a company that, and the owner, the developer of that technology was still working for the company, and they didn't want us to switch because it was their baby. And it was from 1970. And so we need to start challenging that and saying, how do we make it easier for the managers to care about their employees and manage them in a way that gets the most out of it, in a way that makes employees feel appreciated and seen and empowered, and that their work matters to somebody. It feels overwhelming, but if you look at the managers or the leaders' work in its totality and you remove what no longer serves its purpose, you can create space for leaders to care about the human experience at work.
I don't know if that happened to others, sorry, but I've had people that actually turn down promotions for the reason Angela just stated. They're like, it's not that I don't want to be promoted, it's not that I don't want the title, but what comes with it is what they're running away from. So that's an excellent, really good point.
Yeah, and if I added to how would I go about implementing this change about human experience, I think we've spoken a lot about like the buy-in of leadership is critical. I think another real challenge point is resistance to change. So that can be a challenge that employees may be hesitant to alter what they're currently doing, and often that's because they don't really understand the benefits or feel it's necessary. And so really what's really critical in implementing change is really, communication. So inadequate communication can really, so it's really key to be able to get across the vision, the benefits, practical to the employees, to what change you're trying to implement is really critical.
Well, we are about 18 frustratingly short minutes from wrapping this conversation up. But I would really love to hear your thoughts about how can people in the audience take this inspiration from today and put it into practice. Sandra, I really love the point that you made, what is that, first piece of domino that you can push every day and make a change. So I would invite you to lead us into this round of answers. Where to start?
It's an easy question and it's a hard question at the same time, because there are so many places you can start. A lot of time people start with a plan. I say just talk to your people. That's where it's been successful for me. Just acknowledging folks when you pass an employee, acknowledge them. Really be genuine and authentic in your interactions with the employees. You're never probably going to touch everybody, but when you touch someone, when you interact with someone, make sure that it's a lasting impression and that they have the impression that they can talk to you, and do so with the C-suite as well as the janitor. Even if you feel that someone cannot do anything for you, you never know. Interact with them like you would want to be interacted with. So start with the little good morning, how is your daughter? Just basic things. Beautiful weather we're having today. Do you have any plans for the weekend? But be genuine about it. That's what I would say. It sounds basic, but it works.
Yeah.
I would, for people listening in, where to start. If you conduct employee engagement surveys or exit interviews, have a look at the comments or on your Glassdoor employer reviews or surveys that you might send out. Have a look at those comments that employees or ex-employees are making, and figure out the top 2 or 3 common threads in that people are saying, and then pick one and address that as sort of like the low-hanging fruit. The other thing you can do to start is look at your company's stated values. I'm sure on your website or on a poster on a wall, you've got the values and it says things like, we act with integrity, we're customer-centric, we are accountable. And then really start to challenge that and say, if these are our values, what are the behaviors we expect of our leaders and of our employees that demonstrate these values? And then start asking people to behave in accordance with those values. Because sometimes the values are just posted, but you let people, leaders or even employees, operate with a trail of dead bodies behind them because they're the best salesperson. So we're going to accept this bad behavior because they bring in the revenue. Well, that actually affects the human experience and it affects your culture. So if you're looking for a place to start, look at your employee comments. As Sandra said, listen to your employees and pick one or two and start with that. And then look whether your behaviors meet the values that you state that you have.
Yeah, I love what Angela just shared. And I think to build on that also, you can maybe in looking in that, rather than, it doesn't need to be just the team in HR, you can get a number of cross-functional team, get some people from the business, from IT, HR, whatever departments are relevant for your business, and look at that, and maybe you can improve that by just surveying each other and just looking what's your current experiences, what are your needs, and just look at, work together as a group to identify some areas what you can improve. And then, if you start small, you can then try and work at getting that leadership buy-in, that's really critical to get budgets and things like that to actually take an initiatives bigger. But if you start small, look at what's available. I'm sure there'll be a wealth of information available.
And I feel it's important to focus on the business strategy. Where are you headed in the next 12 to 18 months? And what programs, initiatives are going to help drive the both the accountability and the opportunity for success? So once you understand that from a business perspective, I think it's really connecting with the employees and understanding, what's happening there, and then creating different programs that will support that experience. Maybe you focus on something, on a quarterly basis, and you conduct focus groups. You're looking at feedback from employees through either the focus group, the pulse surveys, like Angela had mentioned. I think it's important to take them along in the journey and have their voices be heard.
I'm sure most of you were expecting this question. I've been asking it in every panel over the past weeks. What from our conversation so far would you change or add to or nuanced for those people in the audience who live in a reality of an HR function of one? Because this, back to your point, Sandra, can be an overwhelming task for a team. Yeah. So how can we make it work if we don't have a team of superheroes? How can we make it work for a super team of one?
I would say do what Simon Sinek says. Start with the why and get some allies, get some partners. To your point, a team of one, or even a team of 100, you can only do so much without partners. And so to me, it's really just going back and sell your story. I don't know how you sell it, depending on your environment, your leadership, what's happening, but be intentional about the message you want to convey and get some allies. You need others to understand and buy into your strategy or your vision so that they can help you implement it. I tend to give brief answers, but I hope that makes sense. And if you need me to elaborate, I can. But honestly, it's just starting with the why. People will get in. I think in his book, he said, Steve Jobs never sold Apple. He sold convenience. He sold portability. You can have your iPhone and do a lot in it without being attached to a laptop. So it's really being intentional, being creative about the message and getting those much needed partners to help accomplish the vision.
Hard to not repeat what Sandra said, but as a department of one, I would recommend make sure you're networking with other HR professionals in your city, in your industry, in your jurisdiction, or attaching yourself to an industry association because there's a lot of work that's already been done. You do not have to create it from the beginning. So ask to borrow or use as a guideline policies or programs that other people have already created. You do not, even if you're a department of one, you're not actually alone. The other thing I would say is tap into those employees in your organization that are like-minded or like-hearted, and use them as your ambassadors for whatever program or message you're trying to get across, so that actually, even if you're a department of one, you've got a whole cadre of people going out and doing that work.
I think an important thing as a team of one is you need to work out, be clear about what's achievable, what's realistic to do as a team of one, and then look about implementing sort of incremental changes. I think, as Angela might have mentioned before, like I'll find that one thing and really try and focus and improve that one key thing that we're, again, listening to the various feedback that exists, try and improve that, and then try and build momentum from that. That's sort of one. Another sort of area that I'd say is looking to how do I empower the employees? So what sort of structures can you create that enables employees themselves to take initiative, contribute ideas for improving their own work experience, is another way.
And I've been a party of one on the HR side several times in my career. And I think, both Angela, Sandra, and Rod, had some really great, points. I think networking is really important. Finding, your group in, maybe your city or, a close city that you can meet up with other HR folks and information share, brainstorm, things like that. People are typically very willing to help. There's no reason to recreate things if they exist. You might be able to capitalize on tools that others have implemented in the past and, just tailor it to your audience and your organization. And, I think it's important to prioritize, as, Rod, had also shared, because, it's really challenging when you are a party of one to move the initiatives forward. So the more you can prioritize, even you gain some employees in terms of cultural ambassadors, people for change, things like that to help push your initiative, I think can help you be successful.
There's something, if I may add. Oh, I'm sorry, Rod.
Let's go alphabetically this time. Angela and then Rod.
Okay.
No, it was Sandra.
Who was it? Oh, Sandra. I'm so sorry.
So Rod would go first, and then I'll add what I was going to.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Well, just building on what Julie said, I think, I think if you can really maximize your external resources, I think one of the great resources, like just plugging this resource, the external resource of the hacking HR community, or other HR communities, but is to gather ideas and support. I think you can send questions, you can ask for support on LinkedIn, for so many people that are contributing to hacking HR, and most people want to help. So that's actually a source of extra backup that you've got as well.
Well, I will say great minds think alike, because that's what I was going to emphasize, the part that both Julie and Angela mentioned, networking in the world of virtualness that we navigate and live in. There are so many groups of HR professionals on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on, I don't know about TikTok, but I'm sure there's probably one on there. But there are so many groups that you are never alone. To everybody's point, I belong to several, even though now I do a lot more legal than HR, but I still stay connected because those are my people. They speak my language, I speak their language. And the questions that go through or around that people ask, either anonymously or whether they state their names, it's that in of itself is all another degree you can get in HR, because the situations that come up in the HR world is just they're unparalleled. Like they're better than fiction. So it's a great way to network as well as to use social media to its full advantage.
One other
Wonderful.
suggestion I have, sorry, Manola, is I was listening in on the panel before ours, and one of the speakers mentioned that she is involved in a Lean In Circle. Disclaimer, I used to be the president of the Vancouver network for Lean In, but if you are not yet involved in a Lean In Circle, you can create your own, and that's a great way to get 6 to 8 like-minded people together, human resources professionals, legal experts, and really talk about these sorts of things. And also talk about, somebody said, like, we're humans too. Like, sometimes we're feeling overwhelmed. And so really to get that support as human beings, not just as HR professionals. So I highly recommend that.
Wonderful. So it is the last question of this conversation. We are 5 minutes away from saying goodbye, which means that each of you will get about 1 minute, and I will play the guardian of timekeeping role. I don't enjoy it. So what is, as you play back our conversation in your mind, what is one thing that it's important for you to tell our audience? And I just didn't think to ask. And I will give you a few seconds to think about that, while I will thank everybody for being with us and just building on what you all shared. Also, do drop whatever resource or resources you have found particularly helpful for your work. Drop them in the comments. If it's a reference to a professional association, if it's a book, if it's a course, if it's something that you found helpful, help build the knowledge library of the community. And let's see, who wants to go first? And then I will take the e-mic from there and move it around.
I'll jump in. So I just think, I think this was mentioned earlier, but just I think a key is just managing your time wisely. So you need to be able to block out time where you prioritize daily tasks, but you're also doing the bigger picture, which we're talking about, is key.
Thank you so much, Rod. Julie.
I think focusing on the employee, again, not losing sight of empowering and ensuring a great experience will always lead you in the right direction.
Wonderful. Sandra.
I would say that the concept of wellness, making sure that you're taken care of as well. Rod, I think, just alluded to it, but really it's just HR tend to be caretakers, advocates, that we take care of everybody else, but who's taking care of HR? So if you're in a leader position within HR, make sure you make time out for your team and make sure that you take time out for yourself. We get a lot of complaints and stuff, but sometimes we need to get away from being the counselor and the advocate and take care of ourselves.
Yeah. Angela.
So building on all of those comments, human resources is the champion and advocate of a human experience at work. And sometimes we're in organizations that truly, truly do not believe in creating a good human experience at work. And so I would say, controversially, that organization is not for you. Maybe it's time to move on.
Angela, Sandra, Julie, and Rod, it's been a joy. It's been a privilege. I do feel very, very blessed to have had a front row seat into this conversation. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everybody, for joining either now live or later as you enjoy the recording. And I am looking forward to welcoming as many of you in our future conversations. I will see you tomorrow with 2 panels. And we will take it from there. Many good things still cooking in our kitchen. Thank you, everybody. And also thank you, Jessa. Enjoy a wonderful rest of your day, of your week, and of your month. Thank you.